Good morning or afternoon, everybody. I think I know most everybody on the call. But I'm Pete Zimmerman. I'll be taking you through this presentation today, as Kristen said. The presentation is going to take 20-ish minutes, so there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. And as Kristen mentioned, feel free to reach out to her or me directly if you have any questions or things that come up afterwards, which is common. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. So with that, let me dive in. So what I'm going to be presenting today is specific to our S2K release 6.2 and the hard goods package. Kristen was kind enough to share with me a list of attendees who are planning on coming. Some of you may be on older releases. So everything is going to be familiar and similar to what you have, but there are some nuances here and some differences. And then also for some of you who may be using our S2K food package, again, these concepts will be the same, but there's going to be some differences. And, if you have specific training requirements or issues, again, please reach out to us and we'll be glad to get those addressed for you. So really what I'm going to take you through today is some of the basics of item and bill of materials setup. I'll dive into the advanced sales forecasting capabilities of S2K. And then what we'll do to wrap things up is just review the output and capabilities of MRP. So with that, I'll dive in. So for those of you who may have seen my presentations in the past, I'll use my infamous orange oil item. So, and again, this is S2K Hard Goods Release 6.2. So what you're seeing here is the item master file. And then there's a reorder style field that's highlighted here. So where you want to use our sales forecast, and you have to make the reorder style an F for forecast. I highlighted the H here because you can also just choose to use a history. So although this presentation today is going to talk about sales forecasting, just note, please, there is an option where you can, instead of using a sales forecast, you can simply use your historical usage. I'm going to talk more about that in a few minutes when we get into the advanced forecasting, but I just wanted you to know this is a very important field. You have to make sure that this reorder style is an F, and you'll have to check this box to let the system forecast for you. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's really critical. What you'll find here is the forecasting and MRP are building to this, whatever you have set up as the stocking unit of measure here. Okay, so just an important point, and that can be anything you want in S2K. I think there's some prospective clients on the phone too. So you'll define what your stocking unit of measure is for any item. Okay, so that's our item master file. Then as we drill in further, item balance. So I think this is intuitive, but just to state it, you'll have to set up for those items that you're manufacturing. You'll set up this item type here as being manufactured. And when you do that, there are some key fields to fill out here. Those that really relate to MRP would be the planner code. So what you'll find is in the MRP suggestion manager, you can look to see items that just an individual planner has responsibility for. So that, again, is going to be based on this planner code here. Finished assembly, finished or sub-assembly, pre-assembly, yes or no. Do have some effect in MRP. The primary one I think we need to look at here is this manufacturing lot size. So with the manufacturing lot size, for those of you who may have minimum size runs, that's really the purpose of this. So in my example here, I like to keep things simple for these examples, and especially in a presentation like this. So what I'm saying here is my manufacturing lot size is a quantity of 1. So that's, in my example here in the demo, that's 1 each. I'm going to make 1 unit of orange oil. But what MRP will do, if we say the manufacturing lot size, for an example, is 10, but the system comes up with a manufacturing suggestion of 8, it will actually round that up to whatever your manufacturing lot size is. And then if you have incremental quantities here, so let's just say the manufacturing lot size was 10, but your increments were 5, and you had requirements for 14, the system would tell you to make 15. Okay, so these fields are really critical to set up for manufactured items. If the item is purchased, what you'll see here on the next page is you'll need to define the vendor. So what our application is going to do, of course, is going to make suggestions for all the component parts that you need to purchase. And in order to have MRP effectively do that, you need to have a preferred vendor set up here. you don't necessarily have to order from that vendor. It's just the preferred vendor for the item. Okay, and I do want to point out here that everything in S2K 6.2 hard goods is company and location specific. So for this item, you may buy it from one vendor in this location and perhaps a different vendor in another location. So that's perfectly fine within the application. The other couple of fields I just want to make sure everyone understands are here, the safety stock and max stock values. So for those of you on older releases of S2K, this was called min and max. We've changed this to be safety stock and max because the safety stock is the minimum plus any safety factor percentage that you have on top of the minimum or a day's supply. So that will be your safety stock value here. And what you'll find is once you've accumulated enough historical data, S2K will calculate a safety stock and a max stock for you, literally at the end of every day. That's what this EOD means. But you can override that, as I have done so here in my examples. So I've set up a safety stock and a max stock here. So this safety stock value, we're actually going to see this later in the MRP calculations. So MRP is always going to want to make sure that you have the safety stock quantity available. So that's again a key value, and I will point that out later as we go through the presentation. So these are really the key things here in getting the items set up. So that's item master, item balance information here. I didn't, for this presentation, didn't set up the item vendor information, but hopefully everyone's familiar with that. Again, if you have questions, just let me know. So the idea here being, once you have your items set up, especially manufactured items, then you can attach here a bill of material to that. So what I have here is, again, a fairly simple example, but I think it makes sense. So in order to make 1 unit of orange oil, I need 1 box and 1 each of oranges, as you'll see the item number here. So those are really the key areas that you'll want to make sure are set up. I'll caution you here, you want to make sure that your effectivity dates for the bill of material components are accurate. I have some history with VAI customers setting this up and having invalid dates here. So they had components expiring when they shouldn't have, and that threw off the MRP suggestions. So and just in general, S2K is very date sensitive, so you want to make sure these are correct. You also want to make sure that your revision date is correct and valid. So this is, when is this revision going to be effective? Okay, and then the component parts here. So a cute little feature I just want to point out here in Release 6.2 is this bill of material description. So this is really used when you're creating manufacturing orders. So it's a nice little feature. Again, when you have questions, if you need to see it, just let me know. I can demonstrate to you all another time that feature. But it's a little thing that was added, but I think it has real value. So when you're creating a manufacturing order now, if there's a description here that goes along with this revision, you can see that information. Perhaps this revision is customer specific. So one of the features of 6.2 is that you can actually manufacture an older revision of an item. So finished good, these are the component parts. S2K does support a multi-level bill of material. Again, for our example here, just try and keep it simple. This is a single level, so it's got just a couple of components associated with it. Okay. So now that we have items set up and the components, I'm going to jump over to the sales forecasting. So, and I'm going to talk about here, as I mentioned, the enhanced sales forecasting. And I'll just differentiate that from the basic sales forecasting that's in S2K as well. But the idea here is you can set up as many different forecast schedules as you want. As you can see, I've got quite a few different ones here. And forecasts can be monthly or weekly. You will need to set up one of them as a primary. The primary will be the default production schedule used, the default sales forecast schedule used by MRP, but you'll have an option when you run MRP to select a different one. Again, I'll point that out in some more detail later. So when you set up these forecast schedules, there's an opportunity here to decide, well, at what level do you want to forecast? And what I mean by that is you can, and I would tell you most customers when they use sales forecasting are forecasting by item and location. So how much of an individual item am I going to sell out of this particular location? But there's other options include customer class, customer, division class, and salesperson. So you can take this down to a pretty granular level. So if you wanted to forecast by customer and item by location, that's an option. You can do sales forecasting at a more global level, even just by division and class. So really, when you set up your forecast schedule, you have to pay attention to this and decide how exactly you want to set up the forecast schedule here. But again, there's half a dozen or so different options. I will tell you most customers just use item and location. Okay, from there, I have this one set up. So this schedule 23 is generally what we're going to use here. And what I have, again, this box is, you'll have to check this to indicate here that it's a primary forecast. And you need to have it. You can only have one, but you must have one of those. Okay. So forecast schedule maintenance is pretty straightforward in getting that set up. But then once you have that set up, you'll need to run this option that says create the forecast. So this will go back in history, okay, and it will generate the forecast for you. Now, what you'll note in my example here is I've left everything blank. So it's going to generate the forecast and for all companies, all divisions and classes. My demo is really limited to just one company. So what you'll see here, it's going to go, if I had good data, it will go back and look at all the history for the sales of an item and would show that to us. And then it's going to apply some algorithms to that, which again, I'll just show you here in just a minute. So now once we have the forecast built, we can go into the maintenance. So we can do to quote Ronald Reagan, a trust but verify. So we can now look at this forecast schedule and say, well, what did MRP come up with? Excuse me. What did sales forecasting come up with? So what you would see here, again, I'll apologize, there's not great historical data, but nonetheless, what you would see here is what was the calculated forecast. So based on all of the various algorithms that the system has, what did it calculate the forecast to be? Now, what you'll find here is you, as a user, can manually override that as I've done here. So I've just said, for this example, I anticipate selling 10 units of this for each week. And you'll project that here really as far as you would like. So your planning horizon here is really pretty far out. It's years out that you can schedule. And what you'll then find is as invoices are recorded, so this invoice date, so as invoices are recorded, that's when we're going to be able to see any variance. Okay, so as I show you some other information here, these are actually the algorithms that the system uses. Historical forecast is really no algorithm. It's just saying that what you sold in the prior year, that same period, is what you're going to be selling this year. The other four do have algorithms associated with them. They have math behind the scenes. Please don't ask me what the math is. I don't recall. It's pretty well documented in our documentation, but it's going to go back, the system, the advanced forecasting system is going to go back, look at the historical sales of the item, pass it through these algorithms, and then it will pick one, the one that has the lowest mean squared error, and it will pass that information over into the MRP application. So sales forecasting is looking at historical sales, identifying trends, and finding the algorithm that has the lowest mean squared error, taking those values and passing them over to MRP. So in summary, that's what's happening with the advanced forecasting system. So that's how it's going to help you predict sales. And the MRP side of this is going to help you plan your production. So I had an example here. I just wanted you to see. So I did record some sales. So this is how we're going to be able to see a variance. So and the math here is very easy. So I was planning on 10, I actually sold 24, so there's a negative 14 variance. So I sold more than I was expecting to. So that's what you're going to be able to see here. There's reporting on this as well. A couple of customers have asked me over the last few months for this in Excel. There is a report that you can run and download into Excel the same information. So this is certainly available to you in Excel. Okay, so once we have that built, there are pretty graphs here. Again, this data is not the best, but I think nonetheless, the examples will make sense. So this is where I can see, well, what is it I'm projecting here? And then, so I had sales 10 that are anticipated, and then it drops down here. So this will actually show you an actual versus the forecast. So you'll be able to graphically compare over time what the forecast was and how this compared to actual sales. Again, I just want to reiterate, sales really meaning invoices. Okay, now I showed you there in those screens how you can manually manipulate the sales forecast, but I'll just show you here, there's an update forecast quantity option. So if you want to do a mass change, let's just, for example, say you wanted to, change everything by a percentage or a quantity, or just one item or one division in class, or, just all the items in one location that, again, based on however you have this set up, you'll have an option here to do mass changes as well. So I didn't want you to think you had to maintain every item. There's certainly an option to override here at a more global level and just say, I want to change everything by a percentage or an amount. Okay, and what that's going to do then, it's going to override all of the calculated values for that forecast type here in this example, the historical. So it will override those for you. All right, so now that the forecast is built, and just to show you, this is where I jumped over here to sales analysis reports, sales forecast, and this is where you can actually run this report to compare your actual to the forecast, print, PDF, or Excel. So again, you've got a bunch of options here. I just want you to know that that report exists, and just in case you don't know where it is, it's under sales analysis reports, and then you'll see the sales forecast. Okay. So once we have all of the sales forecasting built, there's an option here to create your MRP suggestions. So much like there was an option to generate sales forecasts, there's an option here to create your MRP suggestions. And we use that word suggestion very carefully because you can override all of the suggestions that are here. You can accept them as is, but you can override the suggestions here. And again, I have some more screens on that, which I'll show you. But the idea here is you need to run this in order for MRP to make suggestions. Most customers run this every day. Okay. And again, you can, if you leave the forecast schedule blank, it will take the primary schedule that you had set up, and it will use that to calculate your MRP requirements. Okay. And so what then you can do as a user is you can go into this MRP suggestion manager. And this is where, if you're a planner, you can input your planner code and just see the items you have responsibility for. If you're a buyer, same thing. So what components is it that you need to buy? The planner would plan out the production. And let me define these dates here. So what MRP does is it looks out into the future and projects out when the system recognizes the item is going to go below the safety stock quantity, which I showed you earlier. That is called the need by date. We offset that date by the lead time to tell you the action date. So the action date is when you need to start the manufacturing order to have it in by the need by date, or when you need to create a purchase order so you have the component in when you need it. That action date then becomes the critical dates here that you need to look at for MRP purposes. Okay, and again, up top, you can leave this all blank, so this can be for all items, just for a vendor, a buyer, a planner, individual items, division, and class, etc. So you have a bunch of options here for how you want to look at this. For demo purposes, I'm going to just show you a bunch of stuff to start off. And what you'll note up top, though, is you can look at just items I need to purchase, just items I need to manufacture, all items, or this expedite option. So the expedite is really defined as something that needs to be brought in sooner. Pretty straightforward. That could be due to some demand changed. Maybe you're got more orders in than you were forecasted. So the system will tell you need to make stuff sooner. Okay. So as I continue on here, you can take this drop-down box, select whatever you like from there. And then as you go into the suggestion manager, this is what the user will be presented with. So these are all, and this is going to be a whole variety of items in the demo, but it's going to tell you all of the items you need to take action on. So again, these are all of the items projected to go below their safety stock quantity over your planning horizon. Here's the box item as an example, right? So this system is telling us we need to buy 15 of these. And I'm going to give you some other examples here. I just want to reiterate here that these are suggestions. There's the ability to override. You can change any of these. Okay, so any of the dates. It may be one of the great features of S2K, for those of you not using our software, is although you may have set the item up to be purchased, and you'll see the item type P here, you can still manufacture it. Converse is also true. Although you may have something set up to be manufactured, you can also purchase it. So you can override the dates, the quantities, and even how you want to treat the item. So that versus manufactured versus purchased. So you'll have that capability all baked in here. Okay, but I want to just look at this orange oil item, which is what we started with, to show you specifically here. If you remember, the safety stock value was 2,000. Now, sometimes, and this is a great example, it may not align exactly. There may be some rounding, minor rounding going on in the background. But the idea here is the system is looking at what is your forecast quantity, what do you have on hand, what open work orders do you have? And again, keep in mind, this is a manufactured item. So it's telling you, you really need to make 1,794 of these to fulfill all the requirements that you have, plus pending orders, so to get you to your safety stock quantity. Now, this will, again, project out your balances. We're just looking at this particular time period. This will time phase things for you. And my view is weekly. I did this intentionally so it'll align with the other data that you've been seeing. But within the MRP application, you can change the mode. So you can look at this daily, weekly, or monthly. So in the background, MRP does all of its calculations on a daily basis. It rounds those up to weeks, and it rounds the days also up to months, depending on the number of working days in any given month. So that's why you may see a slight rounding error here. But again, the system is always looking to keep your inventory balanced to that safety stock value that you had set up. All right. So this is what it would look like. And then this is where, again, you can override, you can change any of these suggestions. You as a user can then override, and then once you're satisfied with all the items, that whether you're going to purchase them or manufacture them, you'll take the integrate option, and that's what will physically create purchase orders or manufacturing orders in the system. I think it's important to point out so far, everything we've talked about are what we call standard suggestions. Based on interfaces and setup in MRP, you can also look to see, well, what items are urgent? And again, this is all kind of user defined, so what is an urgent versus a critical? They're generally within X number of days of being due. Expedite, again, is I need to bring in something sooner. And then there's a push out option here. So the push out really means that, again, demand changed somewhere along the way, or your forecast was off. You don't need the item when you think you need it. And that could be true for purchased items or manufactured items. But the system will then tell you, hey, you can push off this order that you have. You don't really need to bring it in. One little caveat here for you. MRP is going to see this sales forecast. So this is a great example. If it's the last day of the month and you forecasted to sell 100 during the month and you haven't sold any, MRP still thinks you're going to sell 100. So you do have to manage this. You have to watch the data. You do have to be carefully looking at this, because MRP is going to be just calculating that you're going to still need your whatever that forecasted quantity is, okay, regardless of the day of the month. One other point before I leave this screen is, as orders are entered, okay, then the forecast will be decremented. So these requirements really mean customer orders. And by the way, you can drill into any one of these to get more information on, what are the actual requirements. But just know, as customer orders are entered, the forecasted quantity gets decremented. So this forecast is really the balance of the forecast, and you can drill in and see what the original forecasted quantity was. So if you were to select that and drill in, it's going to show you what the actual sales forecasted quantity was here. Okay, so you can double click on any of those cells and drill in. For some reason, over the last few months, I don't know why, but customers continue to ask for this, and you may not know that it's here, But everything I've shown you has been on screen, which I would propose is the way to use S2K. But there is an MRP planning report. So this report will give you a lot of the same output, but it's in a report. Some customers or users seem to prefer to see this in a report or have asked about it. So if you wanted to see a report of show me everything I need to push out, or what are my urgent items, you'll have the ability to, again, produce that report, print or PDF, okay? And then you'll include here, again, whatever information you want to on that report. So all your typical S2K, all your selection prompts are up top. All right, I know that's a ton of information, but that's our advanced forecasting and MRP in a nutshell.